What happens when a former royal meets a host with absolutely no filter? You won't believe what unfolds when Meghan Markle sits down with Jennifer Hudson for what was supposed to be a simple promotional interview, only to have it explode into the most heated celebrity confrontation we've seen all year. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what went down last night on the Jennifer Hudson show. The tension was palpable from the moment Meghan Markle walked onto the set. Sources backstage reported that the Duchess of Sussex had arrived with a lengthy list of topics that were completely off-limits, including anything about the royal family, her relationship with her father, and most surprisingly, any mention of her Netflix deals or business ventures. Jennifer Hudson, known for her direct interviewing style and refusal to be controlled by celebrity handlers, had apparently agreed to these restrictions during pre-show negotiations. But what happened next would prove that agreements mean very little when two strong-willed women clash on live television. As the cameras rolled, Jennifer's opening seemed innocuous enough. "Welcome back to the show. We're here with Meghan Markle," she said with her trademark warm smile. "Thanks for being here with us today," Meghan responded with her practiced media smile, the one that had been perfected through years of royal engagements and Hollywood events. "Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. I'm thrilled to be here." But seasoned viewers of the Jennifer Hudson show knew that this pleasantry was just the calm before the storm. Jennifer had a reputation for getting guests to open up, sometimes whether they wanted to or not. And Meghan, despite her media training, was walking into territory that even she couldn't have prepared for. The first 15 minutes proceeded smoothly enough, with Jennifer asking about Meghan's recent charitable initiatives and her children's book. Meghan delivered her responses with the polished precision of someone who had given these same answers dozens of times before. She spoke about authentic storytelling and creating meaningful change, using the kind of buzzwords that had become her signature since leaving royal duties. But Jennifer Hudson didn't become one of entertainment's most respected figures by accepting surface-level answers. As they moved deeper into the interview, her questions began to probe more personally. "You know, Meghan, you've talked a lot about authentic storytelling," Jennifer said, leaning forward slightly in her chair. "But I have to ask, and I think our viewers are wondering this too, how do you reconcile that with some of the contradictions we've seen? Like, you've spoken about wanting privacy, but then you're constantly in the media spotlight." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Meghan's smile flickered for just a moment, barely perceptible to most viewers, but Jennifer caught it. "Well, Jennifer," Meghan replied, her voice maintaining its practiced cadence, "I think there's a difference between choosing when to share your story and having your story told for you without your consent." Jennifer nodded, but her expression suggested she wasn't entirely satisfied with that response. "I get that, I really do. But help me understand this. You did that interview with Oprah, right? You opened up about some pretty heavy stuff with the royal family. Then you did the Netflix documentary, the podcast series. That's a lot of storytelling for someone who wants privacy." The temperature in the studio seemed to rise several degrees. Meghan's media training kicked in as she attempted to deflect. "I think what's important to understand is that when you're being attacked in the press, when lies are being told about you, sometimes you have to set the record straight." Jennifer's eyebrows raised slightly. Attacked is a strong word. Are we talking about legitimate criticism being labeled as attacks? Because I've got to tell you, as someone who's been in this industry for a long time, there's a difference between facing criticism and being attacked. It was at this moment that viewers began to sense something shifting. Meghan's posture straightened, and her voice took on a slight edge. "I think anyone who followed what was happening in the British press would understand that it went far beyond legitimate criticism. But here's what I'm struggling with," Jennifer continued, her voice remaining calm but her words becoming more pointed. "You left the royal family saying you wanted a more private life. But then every few months there's a new interview, a new project, a new revelation. At what point does it stop being about privacy and start being about profit?" The question landed like a bomb in the studio. Meghan's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly, and for the first time in the interview, her response came without the usual pause for calculation. "I find it interesting that you're questioning my motivations when you don't know what it's like to have your every move scrutinized, your family attacked, your mental health. Hold up, Jennifer interrupted, her voice rising for the first time. Don't know what it's like. Honey, I grew up in Chicago, lost my mother, my brother, and my nephew to violence. I've had my weight, my voice, my appearance criticized since I was on American Idol. Don't sit there and tell me I don't know what scrutiny feels like. The studio fell silent except for the hum of cameras. This was the moment when a standard celebrity interview transformed into something much more volatile. Meghan's face flushed slightly, realizing she had just challenged the wrong person's life experience. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. That's not what I meant, Meghan said, though her tone suggested otherwise. What I'm saying is that the level of institutional racism and sexism that I faced, now we're getting somewhere. Jennifer cut her off again. Because that's real, that's valid, and that deserves to be called out. But what I'm asking you is whether everything that's happened to you can be blamed on racism and sexism, or if some of it might just be consequences of choices you've made. The question hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Studio audience members could be seen shifting uncomfortably in their seats. This was no longer a friendly chat between two successful women. This had become a confrontation that neither seemed willing to back away from. Meghan's response came sharp and fast. I think it's very easy for people to sit in judgment when they haven't walked in my shoes. And I think it's very easy to play the victim when you're sitting in a multi-million-dollar mansion, Jennifer shot back, her Chicago roots showing through her usually polished television persona. The words hit like a slap. The studio audience gasped audibly. Even the cameramen seemed to lean in closer, sensing they were capturing television gold. But what came next would prove that this confrontation was just getting started, and neither woman was prepared to give an inch. Meghan's face went from flushed to pale in an instant. Her perfectly manicured hands gripped the armrests of her chair as she processed what Jennifer had just said. Excuse me, she said, her voice dangerously low. Did you just reduce everything I've been through to living in a nice house? Jennifer didn't flinch. If anything, she leaned back in her chair with the confidence of someone who had said exactly what they meant. I'm saying that when you're worth millions of dollars, when you've got book deals and Netflix contracts, when you're sitting pretty in Montecito, maybe don't lecture the rest of us about struggle. You have no idea what you're talking about, Meghan snapped, her media training completely abandoned now. You think money fixes racism? You think wealth protects you from having your character assassinated daily in the press? No, but it sure as hell makes it easier to deal with, Jennifer fired back. And before you come for me about not understanding struggle, remember who you're talking to. I didn't grow up with a trust fund or Hollywood connections. Everything I have, I earned. The studio had gone dead silent. Even the usually chatty audience members were holding their breath. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. This was two successful black women having a raw, unfiltered argument about privilege, struggle, and authenticity. And neither was backing down. Meghan stood up slightly in her chair, her voice rising. How dare you minimize what I've been through? Do you know what it's like to have an entire country turn against you? To have your own family sell stories about you to tabloids? Your own family? Jennifer's voice dripped with disbelief. Girl, you cut off your father. You barely speak to your siblings. And now you're mad that they're talking. You can't control people and then cry victim when they don't stay silent. They betrayed me, Meghan shouted, all pretense of composure gone. They sold me out for money. And what exactly do you think you did with that Oprah interview? Jennifer shot back without missing a beat. You aired your business for the whole world to see, made serious accusations about the royal family, and got paid millions for it. How is that different? The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Meghan's mouth opened and closed as she searched for a response that wouldn't damn her further. But Jennifer wasn't done. See, this is what I'm talking about, Jennifer continued, her voice gaining momentum. You want to have it both ways. You want to be the victim when it suits you, but also the empowered woman making business moves when that suits you. You can't be both. I am both, Meghan exploded, finally finding her voice. I can be a victim of institutional racism and still be a successful businesswoman. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. You're right. They're not, Jennifer agreed, surprising everyone. But what you can't do is use your victimhood as a shield every time someone questions your choices. And that's exactly what you just tried to do to me. Meghan's eyes flashed dangerously. I wasn't using anything as a shield. I was pointing out that you're being incredibly insensitive to what I've endured. Insensitive? Jennifer's voice rose again. Honey, asking you to take accountability for your own actions isn't insensitive. It's called being an adult. The studio audience was now completely riveted. Some were pulling out their phones, despite the no recording policy, knowing they were witnessing television history. The producers in the control room were frantically debating whether to cut to commercial, but the ratings were probably going through the roof. Meghan's voice took on a coldness that hadn't been there before. You know what, Jennifer? I think I know what this is really about. You're jealous. Jealous? Jennifer laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of what exactly? Of the fact that I married into the royal family. Of the fact that I had a platform that you'll never have. Of the fact that when I speak, the whole world listens. The words were calculated to hurt, and they hit their mark. Jennifer's expression darkened, and when she spoke, her voice was deadly quiet. You think I'm jealous of someone who couldn't last 2 years in the job she married into? Someone who ran away from responsibility the minute it got hard? I didn't run away from anything. Meghan spat. I protected my family. You protected your brand, Jennifer countered. There's a difference. Fuck you, Meghan said suddenly, the profanity shocking everyone in the studio. You don't know anything about protecting family because you don't have one to protect. The studio went completely silent. Jennifer's face went stone cold, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. What did you just say to me? Meghan realized immediately that she had crossed a line, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. You heard me. Jennifer stood up slowly, her chair rolling backward. You want to talk about my family? Let's talk about family. My mother was murdered when I was 7 years old. My brother and nephew were shot to death in Chicago. I know more about protecting family and losing family than you'll ever understand. So don't you ever use my family as a weapon against me. The raw pain in Jennifer's voice was evident to everyone in the studio. Several audience members were visibly emotional, and even some of the crew looked uncomfortable, but Meghan, perhaps realizing she was losing the battle, decided to escalate further. At least you knew your family loved you, she said coldly. At least they didn't sell you out to the highest bidder. Are you seriously comparing your daddy issues to my family being murdered? Jennifer's voice was incredulous now. Are you that fucking delusional? Don't you dare minimize my pain, Meghan shot back, now standing as well. Just because your trauma was different doesn't make mine less valid. Your pain? Jennifer laughed bitterly. Your pain is having a complicated relationship with your father and some mean headlines. My pain is identifying my mother's body and raising myself. We are not the same. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch. Both women were standing now, facing each other across the coffee table like gladiators in an arena. The studio audience was completely silent, witnessing what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked about moments in television history. But this was just the beginning of the explosion that would end with security being called and Meghan Markle storming off the set in what would become the most dramatic exit in talk show history. The tension in the studio was suffocating. Both women stood facing each other, their chests rising and falling with barely controlled rage. The audience sat frozen, phones discreetly recording despite the rules, knowing they were witnessing something that would break the internet within hours. Meghan's voice, when she finally spoke, was shaking with fury. You know what your problem is, Jennifer? You think your suffering makes you superior to everyone else. You think because you went through tragedy, that gives you the right to judge how other people handle their pain. No, Jennifer replied, her voice steady but dangerous. What gives me the right to judge you is watching you exploit every hardship for profit while pretending to be some kind of saint. You've turned victimhood into a business model. That's rich coming from someone who's built her entire brand on being the tragic girl from Chicago. Meghan shot back venomously. How many times have you told that sob story to sell records, to get sympathy votes, to land movie roles? The studio audience gasped. Several people stood up, some heading for the exits, sensing the situation was spiraling completely out of control. But Jennifer didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled. A cold, calculating smile that made the temperature in the room drop another 10 degrees. The difference between us, Jennifer said slowly, deliberately, is that I never forgot where I came from. I never turned my back on my community. I never moved to another country and spent years trashing the people who gave me opportunities. I earned my success. I didn't marry into it. Married into it? Meghan's voice reached a pitch that was almost shrill. I was a successful actress before I ever met Harry. I had my own career, my own money. You had a cable TV show that nobody watched, Jennifer deadpanned. Let's not rewrite history. Fuck you. Meghan spat again, her composure completely shattered. You're just another jealous bitch who can't stand to see someone else succeed. That was it. Jennifer's restraint snapped completely. Jealous bitch? Jealous bitch? Her voice boomed across the studio. You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who had every advantage, every opportunity, and threw it all away because you couldn't handle not being the center of attention for 5 fucking minutes. The producers in the control room were now frantically signaling to cut the feed, but the director, perhaps recognizing the historical significance of the moment, kept the cameras rolling. This was television gold, and everyone knew it. Meghan stepped closer to Jennifer, her finger pointing accusingly. You don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea what I gave up, what I sacrificed. What you sacrificed? Jennifer interrupted, stepping forward to meet her. You sacrificed what exactly? A chance to actually make a difference? A platform to help people? The respect of an entire nation? Yeah, great sacrifice. I sacrificed my mental health. I sacrificed my relationship with my family. You sacrificed nothing, Jennifer roared, her voice echoing through the studio. You walked away from everything because it was hard, because people criticized you, because you couldn't handle being held to the same standards as everyone else. The two women were now standing less than 3 feet apart, their faces flushed with anger, their bodies tense with barely contained aggression. The studio audience was on their feet, some trying to get better angles for their phones, others backing away toward the exits. You want to know what sacrifice looks like? Jennifer continued, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Sacrifice is watching your mother die and still getting up every day to take care of your siblings. Sacrifice is working 3 jobs while trying to make it in Hollywood. Sacrifice is using your success to lift up other people instead of just complaining about how hard your life island. Meghan's face was now bright red, tears of rage streaming down her cheeks. Shut up, she hissed. Just shut the fuck up. Or what? Jennifer challenged. You'll run away like you always do? You'll play the victim again? You'll find some way to make this my fault? I said shut up, Meghan screamed. And then, in a moment that would be replayed millions of times across social media, she reached across the coffee table and knocked over Jennifer's water glass, sending it crashing to the floor. The studio erupted. Audience members were shouting. The production crew was scrambling, and Jennifer stared at the broken glass at her feet with an expression of complete disbelief. Did you just... Jennifer started, her voice deadly quiet. Yeah, I did, Meghan said defiantly, though her hands were shaking. What are you going to do about it? Jennifer looked up slowly, and when their eyes met, Meghan saw something there that made her take a step backward. Security? Jennifer called out, never breaking eye contact with Meghan. We need security up here right now. You're calling security on me? Meghan's voice was incredulous. I threw a plastic cup. No, Jennifer said calmly. I'm calling security to escort you out before you embarrass yourself any further. 2 large security guards appeared from the wings, moving quickly but professionally toward the confrontation. The head of security, a tall black man in a suit, approached cautiously. Miss Hudson? He asked. What do you need? I need Miss Markle escorted off my set, Jennifer said firmly. This interview is over. You can't kick me off, Meghan protested, looking around wildly as if expecting someone to come to her defense. I have a contract. My publicist... Your publicist can call my lawyers. Jennifer cut her off. Get her out of here. The security guards moved toward Meghan, who backed away frantically. Don't you dare touch me, she warned. Do you know who I am? Yeah, one of the guards replied dryly. You're the lady who just got herself kicked off a TV show. Meghan looked around the studio desperately, taking in the sea of phones recording her meltdown, the disgusted expressions on the audience members' faces. and Jennifer's cold, unforgiving stare. Reality seemed to hit her all at once. "Fine," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Fine. I don't need this shit. I don't need any of you." She grabbed her purse from beside her chair and turned toward Jennifer one last time. "You're going to regret this. Do you hear me? You're going to regret crossing me." Jennifer didn't respond. She simply sat back down in her chair, crossed her legs, and watched as Meghan began her march toward the studio exit. But Meghan wasn't done. Halfway to the door, she turned around one final time. "You know what, Jennifer? You think you're so much better than me. But at least I don't have to tear other women down to build myself up. At least I'm not a bitter, jealous has-been who peaked on American Idol." The studio fell silent again. Jennifer stood up slowly, and when she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the room. "And at least I don't have to lie to myself about who I am," she said quietly. "At least when I look in the mirror, I can respect the person looking back at me." Meghan's face crumpled. Without another word, she turned and stormed toward the exit, her heels clicking frantically against the studio floor. The security guards followed at a respectful distance, ready to intervene if necessary. As she reached the door, Meghan paused one final time. "This isn't over," she called back. "Yes," Jennifer replied calmly, settling back into her chair. It islanded. And with that, Meghan Markle disappeared through the studio doors, leaving behind one of the most explosive confrontations in television history. Jennifer sat in her chair for a long moment, looking out at the shocked audience, before finally breaking into a small, satisfied smile. "Well," she said, her voice returning to its usual warm tone, "I guess we're going to commercial a little early today." The cameras finally cut to black, but the aftermath of this confrontation would dominate social media, news cycles, and water cooler conversations for weeks to come. Jennifer Hudson had done what many had wanted to do for years. She had called out Meghan Markle's contradictions, refused to be manipulated, and ultimately showed her the door when she couldn't handle the truth. It was a masterclass in not backing down, and viewers across the country were already picking sides in what would become one of the most talked about celebrity feuds of the year.